today. We would like to also thank everyone for their careful review of the overview video that was shared and the slides that we shared with families late last week. Thank you for taking the time to review the video and the slides as well. We know there was a lot of information there, and yet we know that there are a lot more questions that we will be addressing both today and in some additional information we'll be sending out to families later today and throughout the upcoming weeks. We have approximately 1 hour for today's webinar, and we'll do our very best to address as many questions as possible. So you will hear us attempt to be as succinct as possible so that we can get through as many questions as we possibly can. We have compiled the most frequently asked questions today, so we'll start with those. And additionally, our reopening guide will be shared with families later this afternoon. Many of your questions have been answered in that guide and addressed there, and we hope that that will be helpful as well. And again, we appreciate your sharing so many questions with us so that we could take the time to address those as well. That guide supplements the information that was shared in the overview presentation video and slides that were shared last week. So please look for that guide as additional information. And again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for submitting your questions. I do want to start and introduce the team that will be supporting me in answering some of your questions today. First, I'm Carrie Kermascoli. I'm the superintendent here in the Wilmette Public Schools. And with me, Tony DeMonte was the face you saw right as we were getting logged in. Thank you, Tony. He is our administrator for technology and safety here in the Wilmette Public Schools, and he is also our moderator for today's Q&A, so he'll be presenting the questions to us. He also helped to lead our health and safety subcommittee of our planning team. Also with us today, we have Cindy Anderson, who is our principal of Ramona Elementary School. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today. She will help to address some of the questions that have been provided as well. We also have Katie Lee, who is our administrator for curriculum and instruction. Thank you, Katie, for being with us today as well. Katie helped to lead the teaching and learning subcommittee of our planning team this summer. We also have Kristen Swanson, who is our Executive Director for Special Services. Kristen has been helping to lead our planning teams this summer as well and contributing to quite a few of our teams as she has helped to guide and lead the special education programming and related services as well as the student services that we provide to our students and families. And finally, we have Heather Glowacki, who is here with us today. She is our Assistant Superintendent for Personnel. She helped to lead our school operations and logistics team subcommittee of our planning team this summer and will also help to answer some of our questions today. So thank you, team, for being with us today. We truly appreciate it. And to everyone who is logged in and listening, we appreciate your time as well. So thank you. With that, I will ask Mr. DeMonte to get us started with some of the most frequently asked questions that have been provided to us from our families.
Absolutely. First question, regarding the enrollment commitment, is the commitment for the full semester? And is it possible to change our minds after a few weeks or within the first semester?
Oh, excellent question. This question has come in quite a bit. The enrollment commitment is intended to be a commitment for the semester with teacher assignments and class lists made based on those selections. And as everyone knows, we are making every effort to ensure that there's continuity and connection between students and teachers once those assignments are made, regardless of the model that is implemented at any time. So the enrollment commitment really helps us to define the class assignment and the connection between teacher and student so that we can then proceed with implementing whichever model we might need to implement. We fully expect that we will need to pivot probably several times throughout the school year. And so the enrollment commitment allows us to make those connections right from the start. And whether we are able to provide in-person instruction or we need to pivot to a more fully remote option, or if we enter phase 5 and we can bring everyone back onto campus, we want to maintain those connections to the greatest extent possible. So I think the other part of that question was how long does that go? It does go through first semester, which is through January 22nd. If a parent chooses remote learning, the student will not likely be able to rejoin in-person instruction within that first semester, and that primarily is due to the class size limits associated with the physical distancing that we must have in place for in-person instruction at this point. So it would be very difficult to add multiple additional students into that in-person section. There may be some unique circumstances that could allow a student to transition from in-person to remote learning if a parent requests it. However, again, we're really encouraging families to think carefully about the commitment, as it is intended to be a commitment for the semester with teacher assignments made based on those commitments.
So our next question is one that we received several follow-up questions on. If you can elaborate, if I commit to enrollment for my child for in-person instruction in the fall, and I want to change my mind, will I be able to do so?
Yes, again, and I think I might have just been able to address that a little bit. It will be difficult for someone who committed to remote learning to then transition into in-person instruction simply because of the physical limitations of the space and the class size. We would prefer not to make the switch in the other direction, but we do recognize that there may be some instances where there are unique circumstances that might require us to make a transition for an in-person learner into a remote learning environment. And we will make every effort to accommodate that if we need to. But again, we are trying to keep those enrollment commitments firm for the first semester to maintain those student, teacher, and classroom connections.
Thank you. The next question is, what will happen if a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19?
Excellent. Yes, we did get a lot of questions about this, and I will share, actually, if I can skip forward a little bit. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. This is the District 39 reopening guide that will be shared with families later today. And there's some additional detailed information there that helps to guide our direction when there is a staff member or a student who is tested positive for COVID-19. We must follow the guidance of the County Department of Public Health. And so we will be reporting that instance to the County Department of Public Health or the Illinois Department of Public Health, and they will then be guiding our directions from there. You'll remember that in our overview presentation, we kind of walked through what happens when we become aware of a student or a staff member who has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Again, we will contact the health department. Our school building or the classroom may close for up to 5 days for cleaning and for tracing of that viral contact chain. That really means we will be investigating the contacts that have occurred at school and possibly outside of school and working with our health department to do that. Those who have been in close contact with that individual would then be required to quarantine in accordance with the Illinois Department of Public Health guidance. Most typically that's a 14-day quarantine. And by close contact, we have been advised that means within 6 feet of distance for 15 minutes or more. And so we'll be evaluating that. It is also another reason why the pods will assist us in knowing who's been in contact and limiting the quarantine to the greatest extent possible. We'll be doing then a deep cleaning and sanitation protocol. And we have some communication plans then that will be implemented to ensure that those who might have been in contact are notified of that potential contact. And again, individuals who test positive for COVID-19 will need to follow the IDPH and doctor guidelines. I will share, since everyone is on and we know that additional information is being sought, we do have a chart that is included within our reopening guide that will provide families and staff with the additional information regarding some of the specifics. What if one person is diagnosed? What happens if there's symptoms, but there isn't a diagnosis? What if there was a symptom and ultimately a negative diagnosis? We know that many people, the symptoms associated with COVID-19 are also symptoms associated with many other illnesses. And so the best recommendation is if you have a symptom, go in and get tested. And if you do, and it is COVID-19 is not detected, once symptoms subside, then with that proof of a negative diagnosis, that staff member or that student would be allowed to come back into school in accordance with these procedures. So again, that detailed list, far more than we could have reviewed in the overview video, but this will help to guide us as we move through. But at the end of the day, we will be following the direction of the Illinois Department of Public Health, and more locally, the County Department of Public Health.
There was a related question about the cleaning protocol, but I think you answered it, and I think more detailed information will be in that guide. So in the interest of continuing on and looking at the time, I'm going to keep moving to the next question. Can you please describe the HVAC, ventilation, filtration systems in our schools, and for how fresh air will be circulated in the classrooms?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. In fact, we received a lot of questions regarding air quality, ventilation, filtration, air conditioning. There's really two elements that come into play as we're examining the air within our schools. One is air exchange and filtration, and the other is air conditioning. And we know that both can be of concern for students and for our faculty, as well as for parents at home. In terms of ventilation, opening windows and the use of our univent systems for air exchange does help us to adhere to the air exchange requirements. We, as public school entities, are under strict guidance for school code in that regard. The school code requirement is a minimum of 10% outside fresh air added to the room. And that relates to the air exchange. And again, as we're thinking about COVID, the air exchange is really a critical element, bringing in that fresh air and making sure that the air continues to be exchanged throughout the day. The minimum required air exchange rate, again, is 10% for new air. The dampers on our univent systems automatically control the percentage of air, outside air, that's brought in based upon the outside air temperature and humidity. The minimums are set at 10% rate for operational hours. That process runs from approximately 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. I will add that in terms of filtration, the univent systems use filters. They have fiberglass filters, and we now use the very best that we can. We upgraded those for this upcoming school year. Those filters are changed 4 times a year, and the systems are inspected and maintained at those times of filter exchange. So that happens 4 times a year. There is some additional information. I'll pause there because I know there's a lot of questions that are coming through, but I do want to add that there'll be some additional information included in that guide in case people want to learn a little bit more there. I will add the other elements of air quality that many people talk about is air conditioning. And as we know, not all of our classrooms across our district have air conditioning. In fact, most do not. And at this point, we have developed a protocol for excessive heat days. And on those days, in accordance with that protocol, we would be following and monitoring the temperatures within our classrooms. And we do have the opportunity to close schools on excessive heat days and call for a remote learning day on those days so that learning can continue.
Thank you. There's so much information on each one of these topics. We could go on for a while here. But moving us along, the next question is, how many students will be assigned to each classroom of in-person instruction?
Yeah, great question. We covered that just a little bit in the overview, but basically our elementary principals and teams went through and actually measured all of our classrooms and made sure that there was space enough to accommodate the 6 feet of social distancing, not only outside of our classrooms, but within our classrooms as well. And so what has been determined is that a typical elementary classroom size will be able to accommodate 16 to 18 students. There are some classrooms that are a little bit smaller that will have fewer students, and some that are a little bit larger that will have a few more students. But again, that adherence to the 6 feet of distancing within a classroom is really critically important. So it will be about 16 to 18 students, and that really does depend significantly on the enrollment commitments that, that we know are coming in right now. At our 5-8 campus, the typical class size at this point has been reduced to 24 students per homeroom or per pod. Through the hybrid model, we have cut about half of those students attend each day on either an A day or a B day. So that means about 11 to 12 students will be on campus in person at our 5A campus on any given day. Again, if we move into phase 5, we would be able to bring all 24 students back in, but at this point we can't reduce our class size any further than 24 across the entire 5A campus, and so that's why we're using the hybrid model for in-person instruction at the 5A campus.
Great. Will elementary students have recess, and how will it look different?
I can take that one, Tony. We will be having recess at the elementary buildings, although it will not feel like your typical recess. It will be more like a structured movement break. So after lunch, students will stay with their pod and get a break to go outside with a supervisor. Each class will be assigned a specific zone, so they're only interacting with people in their classroom. And they will have an opportunity to take a mask break if the supervisor can guarantee that they're maintaining that 6-foot social distance. So maybe they sit in a circle and they can take off their breaks and have that little mask break. If the supervisor feels like they need movement, then they might keep their masks on and play a organized game like red light, green light. So there are options for movement, but it won't feel like a typical recess for our students.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that. Moving us along, we have a few questions about lunch, and I think Heather Glowacki is going to, it might be best to answer these. We heard that a cold box lunch could be purchased as a lunch option. Can you tell us what's in that box lunch and what type of menu nutritional offerings will be provided, as well as how much will that lunch cost?
Thank you, Tony. Yes, our committee did spend some time discussing this and the logistics of serving lunch. Our cafeterias are pretty fantastic in terms of the offerings that we've been able to provide for students within our own school cafeterias. But the logistics of a hot lunch and moving students through lunch lines just seemed not in our best interest at this point. And so we landed at a place of serving and offering a cold box lunch every day. Lisa Winter, who recently retired from the district, is still assisting us and collaborating with us about what that could look like. We will continue to provide monthly menus with nutrition facts, but it will be a pre-packaged lunch that our cooks will prepare within our school cafeterias, likely a sandwich, a fruit and or vegetable, along with a drink, either water or milk, depending on the nutritional facts that are needed for that day and in meeting the daily guidelines. The cost of the lunch will remain the same, and so at our May board meeting, it was determined that the cost of a school lunch for students in kindergarten through 6th grade will be $3.75, and students in 7th and 8th grade, their lunch will be $4.15. But again, the offering of the school lunch for each day will be provided in a monthly menu so that parents can make the decision whether or not their children want to purchase the school lunch or bring a lunch from home.
Thank you, Heather. And we're going to pivot back to Dr. Cremascoli for the next question. If the district as a whole transitions to full remote learning for the start of the school year or at some point throughout the school year, will my child remain in the same teacher's classroom?
Another great question, and yes, they will remain connected with the same teacher or teacher team at the 5-8 campus. People might remember, if I can move a little bit forward here, we are in phase 4, and our plan really aligns at this point with the phases of the governor's Restore Illinois plan. So we are prepared to shift between our models, and our goal really is to set up class assignments for students right from the start of the school year in accordance with parents' preferences for in-person or fully remote learning. That's why those enrollment commitments are so important. And then throughout the year, if we do need to move into full remote learning, either for the entire school or for the entire district, those pods will remain connected so that then hopefully at some point when we move back to in-person options being available, that same group will just simply move back. So right now we have defined, and you saw these within the slides, we've defined kind of what it would look like if we move to a fully remote learning program district-wide. That might be because of movement to phase 3. It might be because the county health department advises us to transition based on localized data, or we will continue to monitor our safe implementation of health and safety guidelines and protocol, and there may need to be some movement based on that as well. And again, we see that movement in the other direction if we can move to phase 5, if a vaccine becomes available, or the governor's phase moves us in that direction. Our goal is to maintain those classroom connections for the entire school year for our students and for our staff, so that there is that continuity and connection throughout.
Thank you. Moving on to the next topic, Keep 39 and possibly some busing questions related as well. Question starts out, I registered my child for bus service for Keep 39, but no longer wish to participate in this service. Can I receive a refund for the deposit? And then related, there's some questions about school bus safety and how that works during these times.
Great, I'll try to address both. First of all, again, we are excited to be offering and to be able to offer the Keep 39 program for those families who committed to it last year. We do understand though that there has been some shifting of what families are comfortable with and what we're able to provide as well. And so the program will still be available to those who registered at the end of last school year. If a family wishes to withdraw their registration, they can do so by contacting the business office or the school principal, and then the child will be enrolled only in the half-day kindergarten program, whether in person or fully remote. And yes, those fees that have been put down as a deposit for the program would be refunded for those who wish to do that. However, you would need to notify us at this point, because again, those class assignments will be defined based on those enrollment commitments that are submitted. I'll say the same is true for busing. At this point, families should have received an email follow-up from our transportation coordinator asking those families who committed to busing by July 12th to indicate if they're still interested. We have some families who committed to busing and now are choosing a fully remote program, and others families who are still wanting to pursue the in-person instructional model, however, are more comfortable transporting their own students. And so we ask those families to indicate on the survey that has been provided to them what their interest is for the first semester. And again, consideration for second semester will be made at a later date. And again, the deposits that have been submitted, if you're not using first semester transportation and you let us know now, we will refund those transportation deposits that have been submitted.
Briefly, just also related to busing, and I apologize if I didn't hear it, but will we have enough buses to accommodate one student per seat? I'm not sure if that was mentioned or not, but it was a question that came up from a parent.
Thank you. Great question. We have been advised by our transportation service provider that they cannot give us more buses or more drivers at this point. So what we are doing is we are sifting through all those who requested busing, and then through those survey results, we will be assigning bus routes. We recognize that fewer students will be in our schools than on any other typical year. And so that helps to limit the need for transportation. But from there, if there are more students than our buses could accommodate, we will have to go through a prioritization process. Most likely that will be based on needs of family and distance from school. At this point, we are hopeful that those who really need transportation to get to and from school for the in-person model will be able to access that option. So again, really important that families respond to the survey for transportation, those who have already indicated an interest in that, so that we can get those bus routes set up in accordance with the AB schedules and all of the other needs that are happening across our district.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, we understand that reduced class sizes will require more classroom teachers. How many students will be assigned to each classroom of in-person instruction at the elementary level, Highcrest, and WJHS?
Yeah, so I think we answered that. At the elementary level, it'll be about 16 to 18 students in each homeroom classroom, depending on the size. And for the in-person instructional portion at 5-8, it will be about 11 to 12 students.
Thank you. How are reassignments of staff at the elementary school working? Will my child be taught by a teacher who is not properly licensed?
Oh, excellent question. There are a number of our teachers who have needed to be reassigned in order to accommodate the smaller class size at our elementary level. Some of those teachers include our Spanish teachers, our technology teachers, our reading specialists, and library teachers. At this point, those teachers, the only people being reassigned for those positions are teachers who are properly licensed and certified. So all of our general education classrooms will be taught by a teacher who is appropriately licensed and certified. There will be additional support and professional development planned for the start of the school year to support those teachers in that transition, because we do recognize there are differences between the technology teaching position and the general education teaching position. And I think Katie might be able to address some of those questions. I don't know if those are up now or maybe in a little bit.
I can answer. I'm sorry, my microphone was muted. So every year we do have new teachers join the district, and also some District 39 teachers who change positions or roles. So the system of supports we have in place will continue to be provided. And some of those systems are the new to District 39, new to position, assigned to position. Will have orientation days apart from our August Institute days, and this year we will have 3 of them at the beginning of the year. We do have one-to-one mentoring program. The matches are job alike. They meet before and during the school year. The district-wide grade level and department meetings provide another level of support. And we also have 2 additional teacher institute days, one typically scheduled in October and another in February. Finally, principals support, in my department, also support our teachers. One thing I must mention too is how wonderfully collaborative and supportive our teachers are of one another, and they plan together and check in with one another regularly as well.
Great, thank you, Katie. So the next question is a little related with this talk of specials teachers possibly being reassigned to classroom positions. What will be offered as far as specials at the elementary level? What would that look like? What would it include? And Cindy, you're a great person to answer this question. Thank you.
Absolutely, Tony. So every day our students will be getting PE. That movement break is key. And so they'll have 20 minutes of PE, and that'll be outside as much as possible with weather permitting in the classroom. And they will stay with that group of 16 to 18 students through their PE class as well. So their pod will remain the same. The students will also be offered art and music in person, and then we'll have some supplemental opportunities for library, technology, and Spanish lessons. And the offerings will be the same for the students who choose in-person learning and remote learning.
Great, thank you, Cindy. I'm actually going to skip a question that was related to heat and weather, because I believe that was addressed earlier, and move back to a curriculum question, whether it's Dr. Krumskolly or Katie Lee, could be suited for this one as well. Who plans the remote learning curriculum? Is it consistent across the grade level, building, or is it by the individual instructor?
Carrie, I'll take that one.
Okay.
So we do have curriculum map frameworks available, which are used by our teachers to plan. So they would continue to use them to lesson plan. Teachers, administrators, and parents identified through reflective conversations last spring and also over the summer. We gathered feedback from surveys, and one thing that we understood very clearly was that consistency was the key in moving forward. So through our work in our subcommittees, what we've done is we've established expectations and guidelines to, and developed them so that we can maintain that throughout this year. whether in person or remote, consistency being the key across all aspects of the curriculum and instruction.
Great, thank you, Katie. Next question, and Heather, if I could ask you to jump on this is one I believe you can answer. Is the district taking steps to increase its substitute teacher pool?
Yes, we are. We do every year, but especially this year, we're going to be looking to increase our substitutes that are working daily, so they come in as needed, and then also looking for long-term substitutes who might work for a more extended period of time for teachers that might not be able to be with us for an extended period of time.
Thank you, Heather. And then Dr. Krumskoli, I think we're going to shift back to you for this next question. There's multi-parts in it. This legally might not be possible, but can we ask parents to sign some sort of contract that states that they will adhere to strict social distancing, won't send kids to school when sick, will keep kids home if they've been traveling, etc. There's so much trust that comes into play this year among families and for our staff.
Yes, that is so very true. Trust in our collective commitment to maintaining the health and safety of all is really critically important at this point. So there are a couple of things that we can do. I'm not sure that we can obligate through contract parents adhere to the legal responsibilities of social distancing. However, we will have a commitment that is made at the beginning of the school year by families and students to maintain and be honest in their adherence to those to the greatest extent possible. And we also are doing symptom checks every day before students come to school. Those symptom checks will ask questions regarding COVID-19 symptoms, but also regarding some of the other elements that we know are indicative of maintaining a healthy environment. And so families will need to what we call self-certify at home for their child before the child comes to school. We will also be doing temperature checks of every student before they enter the building. And so that will be accomplished through a contactless thermometer. We also have some thermal cameras that will help to make that happen really efficiently as students are coming to school. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to do everything we possibly can to adhere to the guidance that has been provided to us by the governor and by the medical professionals who have really helped us to understand transmission risks, and the ways in which we can mitigate that. We can control what happens within our school through social distancing and through masking and through symptom checks, but we do need to rely on our families and our community as a whole to adhere to those outside of the school as well. We're also very familiar with the travel bans that have been implemented at this point, and so we will be following along with those as well.
Great, thank you. Many school districts are utilizing tents in their outdoor space as much as possible. What plans have been made for outdoor instructional spaces?
Thank you. In fact, Tony, you might be able to answer this question even better than I, but we have made arrangements for tents to be available at all of our schools. Those tents will be utilized as flexible spaces for classroom instruction, so teachers can go outside. They also might be used for PE teachers on those days where weather is especially inclement, though sometimes the PE teacher may be inside as well. Those spaces also could be used for lunchtime, both for our students and for our staff. And so we're really trying to create as much flexible space as possible outdoors, recognizing that that will be comfortable space for our students and for our staff to take breaks in, to receive instruction in, and to eat as well.
Great, and that is correct. So great job with that answer. Next question. If my student goes remote, will his or her virtual classmates also be from the same school?
Oh, so that's a really good question. And those are some things that we are looking at this point. It depends on the enrollment commitments that come in. Ideally, we would have enough commitments that there would be a section for each grade level at each elementary school, but we won't know that until we know how many families are committed to the fully remote option that will allow us to build out those sections. It is possible that we will have those remote learning sections, serving students from 2 different schools within our district. And we think that could be of benefit as well in terms of building some of those connections throughout our community. So again, that will depend on the enrollment commitments that come in.
And Heather, I saw you pop in. Was there anything you wanted to add, or was that captured correctly?
Captured correctly, thanks.
All right, great. Next question. And Katie Lee, I believe you're needed for this next one. Please provide more information about what e-learning will look like in the fall and how it will be similar to or different than e-learning we had this past spring.
Yes, so I addressed it very briefly before about consistency, but in our reopening presentation, we had a section for the pre-K-8 enhanced remote learning, and all of those areas of focus, meaning instructional tools and expectations, the school day schedule, curriculum and assessment, special education, and support for District 39. Primarily the work over this summer has been really to focus on how to become more consistent, because that is the key. So what we shared was that the learning management tools and expectations would be consistent so that there's not variance across grade levels or teachers. For pre-K4, we're using Seesaw. For grades 5 through 8 is Schoology. And that's so that they can interact directly with the students. The video conferencing tool, we have committed to Zoom as our conferencing tool. And all teachers will be using that. And then also the student device would be consistent for the grade levels. There is a daily agenda that is being committed to being sent to families. There are synchronous sessions and those synchronous opportunities throughout the day. Our ISB guidance has been shared that it is 2.5 hours that would be spread out throughout the day. Then there would also be asynchronous lessons, and attendance is really important. We want to engage our students, and we want to be sure that we know that they are engaged with us. So attendance will be monitored. We will be checking in on work completion, work progress, student progress, providing feedback, and also the report cards would go back to our typical District 39 practices. So I believe the school day schedule has been outlined as well as far as the start time and the end time, and I can go into that detail if you wish. However, I think that's it. I think that's been pretty much covered. The other additional piece of that would be our support for District 39 families. We feel it's really important to provide that support. So we have some virtual parent events scheduled. We also have some learning scheduled for tablet or laptop orientation, all of the tools that I just mentioned, and how we want to build community and what that looks like. And also we want to share about our approach to the balance of online and offline experiences.
I will just add to that if I might. I know that there is a lot of professional development, Katie, that your team is planning, as is typical for most school districts, and the Wilmette Public Schools are no different. We have the opportunity for Institute Days at the start of the school year, and typically we have 2 days, and that training is focused on our teachers and our paraprofessionals. This year, we do expect to extend that a little bit further. So right now we have approximately 4 days set at the beginning of the school year for that training. So 3 full days and then 2 half days that will provide some additional training for our teachers. That training and support, both for those teaching in person and remote, will continue to happen throughout the school year. Our teachers have some common planning and collaboration time that's available to them. And at the elementary level, where the time of the school day ends a little bit earlier, all teachers then will have that plan time that will allow for some ongoing planning there. I'll also mention Katie shared that the state has issued some additional guidance regarding remote learning. Unfortunately, that wasn't provided to us until right at the end of July, and so we've incorporated that into our plans and continue to review and update what will be happening within the remote environment. But we are really excited about the enhancements that have been made within that remote environment and the connections between teachers and students that will be happening in ways different from what was happening in the spring for our students.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Katie. Heather, can I ask that you jump on for the next question? Will there be an opportunity for parents to see the school or classroom somehow, and will there be an opportunity for us to meet our child's teacher?
Thanks, Tony. As you can see from our plans, our goal in everything that we're laying out for the fall is to limit who comes into our school. So unfortunately, our typical back to school start day where parents are welcome to come into the schools will not be possible this year. I will say we're looking at alternatives to that to try and have our parents feel as connected to their child's teacher and their new classroom as much as possible, but we're still in the planning phase for that. We will have curriculum night as we usually do, albeit probably different structure. So you'll have an opportunity to meet your child's teacher at curriculum night, if not beforehand. But we are looking at different ways that we might be able to help parents feel connected to the new classroom and new teacher for their children.
Great, thank you, Heather. Katie, if I can ask you to jump on. This one I know will be detailed in the guide later today, so we may just want to defer to that, but can you briefly explain the Highcrest and junior high hybrid schedules?
Sure. Yes, definitely. I wish, if I could, I'd like to share my screen. I'm going to try to do this relatively quickly. Tony, you are correct in that we will be, this information that I'm sharing with you is on our reopening guide. But for the basic 5-8 structure that students will be participating in, the school day start and end times are as follows. The Highcrest Middle School will begin at 8:50 as well and end at 3:35. And Wilmette Junior High will begin at 8:25 and end at 3:10. So for the hybrid school day schedule, the in-person days, here's a sample schedule that may help with a visual. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it. Great. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, great. So here's on the left, you will notice the Highcrest sample in-person schedule where the times and the periods and the subject matter and the classrooms have been consistent. And then on the right side is a Wilmette Junior High sample in-person schedule. Okay. And then for the remote days, here's another sample of the chart that tells you about the remote schedule for a Highcrest student and also for the Wilmette Junior High.
That's perfect. So I have a few related questions. If you can stop the share, I might ask that Kristen maybe jump on. I believe she's here as well. Great, thank you, Kristen. For special education, now that we've seen a schedule, a sample schedule for Highcrest Junior High, this could also relate to elementary as well, but for special education students, how are we deciding who will attend daily or who will follow the hybrid model of instruction?
Yeah, so some of our students who receive most of their services through a special education teacher, so that would be students in our comprehensive learning program or in our therapeutic intervention program, or students who have multiple instructional classes at the Highcrest or junior high level, we would be considering those students for attending full days. Those are students who really have significant needs, often which cannot be addressed, especially for our kids in the comprehensive learning program, as easily through a remote learning platform. So we would be looking at full day attendance for those students every day.
Thank you, Kristen. Katie, can I have you jump on for the next one? For the hybrid model at Highcrest, on the days when students are remote at home, For synchronous learning hours, are they taking live lessons with their homeroom teacher, with the other group in the classroom? How is that working?
Yes, so for the hybrid remote school day, the students will be following a 9-day schedule. Daily homeroom will be live and synchronous for all. So the students that are in person as well as at home. We have also multiple required synchronous opportunities throughout the day. One that I mentioned is homeroom. Another one would be the world language or academic strategies for students who has that class. And then there will be a synchronous end of day check-in.
If I might just add, I know we've received a lot of questions about live streaming. And at this point, there isn't a plan for live streaming what's happening in person in those core academic classes to the home environment, but instead connections to be happening throughout. So each period, the students who are at home will be connecting in some way, checking in with their with that period's class. It may not be with the actual students, but teachers may make it a connection among the entire class. The ultimate goal is to ensure that students stay on that schedule, remain engaged, and continue their learning throughout. We know that when they're in person, that instructional group will be only approximately 11 to 12 students, and so that is intended to be the really intensive instructional portion of their learning throughout.
And Carrie, stay on for this next question, please. If an entire in-person classroom needs to quarantine, will the whole class move fully to remote instruction?
Yes, if the entire class, or in the instance where an entire school may need to close for in-person instruction, that entire environment then would transition or pivot to the remote learning environment.
Great, thank you. Heather, can I ask that you jump on for this next one? We've had a lot of questions from parents about staffing. Are staff and teachers allowed to apply for a leave of absence or accommodation for medical reasons?
Yes, they are. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act provides for additional leave options for staff related to childcare and potentially illness from COVID-19. So there are additional provisions available to staff to take leave.
Thank you, Heather. Cindy, can I have you jump on for the next one? And just for the parents on this webinar, and as a quick time check, I am seeing that it's 9:20, so I'll try to quickly ask my questions here. But Cindy, the next one is, will there be outdoor ed this year?
Unfortunately, we will not be able to attend outdoor ed with our fourth graders unless we are in phase 5 of the governor's plan. So as of right now, I'm planning on postponing Ramona's October trip to the latest date that Laredo Taft has available, and we'll wait and see.
Great, thank you. Katie, can I have you jump back on for a homework question? How is homework going to be assigned to remote students?
It would be provided both online through Seesaw or Schoology, or and it could be also paper and pencil.
Great, thank you. Carrie, if I could have you jump back on. If we return to a hybrid or in-person learning, how many positive COVID tests will it take to revert back to remote learning?
That's a really good question. There isn't a specific threshold of number of cases. It will be guided again by that transition plan that we have built out, first guided by the Department of Public Health, who will be evaluating and helping us to contact trace, and then also guided by the governor's reopening plan in the different phases. We are also looking at some additional metrics that will help us to better understand what's happening specifically in Wilmette and the New Trier Township. The superintendents are really collaborating on some additional data points that might help to guide that. The critical piece is that any staff or student who has been in close contact with someone who has a positive COVID-19 diagnosis must quarantine for 14 days or until the symptoms subside. And so we will be closely adhering to that in every way. And again, I would ask parents when the when the guide comes out a little bit later today to really look closely at that chart. It does give us some decision rules, but more specifically, we will be following the Department of Public Health guidance once there is a identified case.
Carrie, I'm going to ask that you stay on. I am going to skip a question that came up about how the schedule is different and synchronous lessons and those kind of things. I think that'll be detailed in the plan and just looking at the time. I'd like to ask the next question about kindergarten enrichment. Will kindergarten enrichment still be occurring given the modified times, or have their time modified? Related, AM kindergarten enrichment was to be slated from 9 a.m. to 12:30 every day. So how is that impacted?
Yes, all of the schedules shift just a little bit. The kindergarten enrichment program would follow essentially the same schedule that is provided for our 1st through 4th grade students. So dismissal would conclude at that 2:15 time. We have been in close conversations with the Park District, who will continue to offer some additional programming for our families. They are looking at some after-school opportunities for families if they wish to enroll in that. They will continue to offer the kindergarten enrichment program that they have offered in the past. And then in addition, we are really partnering with them because we've heard from our families that there are some needs for childcare or supervision on the days where our High Crest students in particular are on the hybrid remote days. And so the Park District is in the process of exploring some options for providing supervision and a safe place for students to attend remotely through the Park District program. So there are a number of options that are being explored there.
Great, thank you. Cindy, if I can have you jump on for the next one. Earlier, Katie shared a sample of 5 through 8 schedule and talked a little bit about how that would look. The question for you as an elementary principal would be, what would look different in the modified in-person schedule for elementary students? And why does that day need to be shortened?
Sure. The biggest difference is that the students will really be staying with their pods or their classrooms for most of the day. In order to minimize exposure to other people, we wanted to keep the kids in their classrooms with that group of 16 to 18 students. So we had to minimize the amount of movement around the school in crowded hallways and to other classrooms where other students might be. So the students will really be in their classrooms for instruction, and some of the specials will go to their rooms when that's happening. In order to make that happen, we still do need to provide teachers time to plan for the next day, grade papers, provide feedback to students. So that plan time has been moved from in the middle of the day to the end of the day. So they have time to collaborate and plan.
Thank you, Cindy. Carrie, was there anything to add possibly about 5 through 8 or anything related to that comment about how that would work?
In terms of the 5-8 schedule, if I'm understanding the question correctly, students will be following that 9-period day as Katie was describing earlier. And so there is plan time already established within that 9-period day for our teachers. And so that day, when you're in person, looks pretty similar. When you're home, if you're a student at home, again, it looks pretty similar in terms of following your class schedule. And similarly, teachers will be assigned their same typical periods of instruction that they would be assigned, and then their plan time as well.
Thank you. That's exactly what was being asked, except didn't articulate it as well as I could have there. So thank you. Katie, can I ask that you jump back on? There's a question about MAP testing. Is that going to occur this school year?
Yes, we will have MAP testing this school year.
Great. Cindy, if I could have you jump back on. The classrooms are going to look a little different this school year. Our parents here may have seen pictures of classroom setups in the presentation that we had previously. There's some parents that might have concerns about students having a hard time connecting with the teacher. Could this setup be difficult for students to engage and be active in the classroom? And what kind of steps are you taking to address those concerns?
It's a great question and something we've debated a lot this summer as we've been making these plans. You know, we all have to kind of grieve what we picture the old classroom, the carpet time and the small group work where people are huddled, collaborating together. We just can't make that happen safely. So we have to adjust, but our teachers are amazing and I know that they will adjust. And they're already doing work right now, planning for the first couple of weeks of school to really focus on building relationships with students, making connections, team building, social emotional learning, and really creating that classroom community that we know is so important to learning. And then as they go through the year, they'll differentiate their instruction just like they normally do, and they will adjust to the new environment, working with the students, taking their feedback and creatively engaging them.
Great, thank you. Kids are very resilient in that way. Carrie, I'm going to switch back to you. If a child tests positive, what's the process or procedures for communicating? And would the children sitting directly next to the child who was infected have to quarantine? Would the whole class quarantine? If you could just talk to those points.
Yes, and again, that is spelled out a little more in that chart that I showed earlier. But those who are in close contact with that student, whether it's a student or a staff member who tests positive, would be required to quarantine. And so we would be working with the Department of Public Health to do that contact tracing, and then notifying those who might be in close contact. So most certainly anyone within the pod would be notified, and then we would be proceeding from there to determine who needs to quarantine, if it is just that classroom or if it extends beyond that classroom to include the whole school. And again, that is dictated quite a bit by the Department of Public Health and the amount of close exposure that the students have had with that person who has tested positive. Again, this is an important element of our bubbling or our pod approach. It's also an important element of continuing to maintain that safe distance across all environments within the school. So that 6 feet of distance is really critically important, as well as wearing face masks and limiting transmission to the greatest extent possible.
Great, thank you. I may skip around. I'm doing a quick time check. It's about 9:29. So let me see if I can find a question possibly that hasn't been addressed already in some way. Actually, Cindy, can I have you jump on for this one? Can you describe the drop-off and pickup procedure, how students will be kept 6 feet apart outside or in the hallways? I know we've talked about temperature checking, but can you just kind of describe that process for our parents?
Absolutely. As people know, drop-off and pickup are really crowded. And so this is something that the committee I was on, school operations and logistics, we really focused on this a lot this summer. Everyone will be getting building level specifics from their principals before the year begins, but I'll give you the general overview. So before students come to school, we will be asking them to self-certify, and then we will be doing temperature checks at every door. And I say every door, which is different than how we normally do things. So at Ramona, on a normal morning in a typical year, all of the students come in one door. This year, we're going to be splitting it up so that each grade level has their own door around the building. And we believe that's important so that students are doing most of their traveling outside instead of in a crowded hallway. Then once they get to that door, they'll do the temperature check and the self-certified will be checked in, and they'll go straight to their classroom where the teacher will be waiting. We expect that that's going to need to be a rolling admission, so over about 10 minutes. So to have parents, it'll be close to the beginning of the school day at 8:35, but we might ask people to wait till 8:40 or 8:45 and to kind of roll in so all 100 first graders don't come at one time. So that's the arrival procedure. And then at the end of the day, the dismissal will be, again, kind of a rolling dismissal over 10 to 15 minutes, where we'll stagger the bussers and the bikers and walkers and the people who are picked up in the car line or meeting their parents, so they're all not leaving at once. We also will be, again, using those same doors to spread out the dismissal so everyone's not leaving through one door. And we'll be asking parents and caregivers who are picking up their children not to stand so close to the building. So if you are a Ramona parent, you can picture we all kind of cluster together at the end of the day, and it's a community builder. But this year's different, and we're going to ask you to spread out and make a meeting place for your child to come and meet you. And of course, we'll ask that everybody wears a mask at drop off and pick up and maintain 6 feet of distance.
Thanks, Cindy.
Oh,
Katie's going to jump back on for some map clarification.
yes, I'm sorry. I realized, you know, I should have added more information about that because I don't want there to be any confusion about my response that MAP would be administered this school year. MAP will be administered this school year for students who are in person as well as remote. What has been nice is the NWA MAP company has already thought about this and what has set aside time to develop protocols and procedures of how to administer for students that are at home. So all students, when we say that MAP will be provided this year, all students will be taking that assessment. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Katie. We appreciate the clarification. Next question, Carrie, if I can have you jump back on. If you would, please describe the cleaning and sanitation process, frequency that we're going to have this fall.
Yes, and here again, Tony, I know you can add to it. So if I miss something, please feel free to jump in. But generally speaking, all classrooms will be cleaned nightly with a disinfecting routine. Recurring cleaning of high-touch surfaces will occur throughout the school day, along with additional targeted cleaning of bathrooms and specified locations. Where food is consumed, which at this point the plan is to provide most classes the opportunity to eat lunch within the classroom, their homeroom space, but there will be some adjustments depending on allergy needs and other opportunities to possibly eat lunch outside on nice days as well. There will be specific cleaning routines. Those will be performed by trained adults to clean and disinfect these areas prior to resuming instruction. We have made arrangements for sanitation kits that will be maintained within each classroom and restocked as needed or as requested. There's also a special cleaning protocol, and Tony, this might be where you want to jump in, but a special cleaning protocol that will be followed to disinfect and clean any area where an identified person who has symptoms or COVID-19 test positive, that will be implemented. So any areas that of the school that was used by a sick person would be closed off and not used until that proper cleaning and disinfecting procedure was completed. It is advised by the CDC, so our cleaning protocol is really following what the CDC has said, but I will add that we have made some purchases of special UVC lights that will be used in those areas to assist in disinfecting those areas after cleaning has occurred, excuse me. These are very similar to what often are used in hospital settings. This is, Tony, where you might be able to add a little more because I know you've been intimately involved in helping to evaluate those, and you've talked to many of our doctors as well to help advise that decision.
Yeah, no, you did a great job explaining it. It would just be putting us in line with those in the medical community and utilizing that UVC technology to sanitize the classroom. So, no, you did a great job explaining. Carrie, it's about 9:35, and I think we have time for one last question before we end this morning. The final question is, what will the school calendar change? Will the school calendar change for this upcoming school year?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So we know right now that our teachers are scheduled to report to work on the 24th, and that has, since the calendar got approved last year, it's been scheduled the 24th and the 25th to be institute days. So those are professional development, teacher learning days. And so those remain on the calendar. Wednesday, the 26th was originally scheduled to be a half day of attendance for students and a half day of ongoing professional development for our staff. We have determined that that 26 will again be additional professional development. We are hoping, at least as it stands right now, the calendar on the 27th and 28th would provide for that first connection between student and teacher. Those will be shortened days to allow for that connection to happen, and then again for additional professional development and training for our teachers. there may be a need for some additional revisions to the calendar as we get a little bit closer. We expect that the board will be reviewing the calendar at the August Committee of the Whole meeting prior to the first day of school. But those are, generally speaking, some of the adjustments that have been made to the calendar. I should mention one other. We know that with the election happening in November, there has been a requirement that schools not provide, not have that be a school day for students. And so that day also has to be adjusted on our calendar, because originally that was going to serve as a student attendance day, and it will no longer. That is, I think, November 3rd. Thanks, Tony.
Sure. And that really, Carrie, is it. So it's your opportunity for some final thoughts and comments. And I think that we captured the majority of the questions for today.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, I simply want to thank everyone for your participation in today's webinar, for submitting questions to us, and for taking the time to really review the overview information that was shared with families last week. Your questions have helped to guide our continued planning and communication. And so later today, you will receive a guide that offers some additional information and really gives a detailed written format of what was presented the other day in video and in slide presentation. So we hope that that will be helpful. Look for that. Again, we are asking everyone to submit their enrollment commitments by Thursday, and that will then help us to begin the process of creating class lists and class assignments. We expect that there will be needs for continued communication, and so please continue to keep an eye out for emails and communication from the district as well as from your school. Schools expect to communicate next to families on August 14th. There is a lot for us to do as we prepare for the start of the school year, but on behalf of our entire administrative team, the Board of Education, our faculty and staff, we are excited to start the upcoming school year, and we know that it will be a different year than years past, and yet we are committed to ensuring the very best educational services for our students while maintaining health and safety of all as our top priority. So thank you so much for your participation today, for all of your questions, and for your thoughtful review of our reopening plans. We wish you well. Bye-bye.